Pakistan has a very tricky place on the world stage. Economically, they're not very influential. They have a GDP of $341 billion. That's smaller than the GDP of the state of Wisconsin in the United States. Even though Pakistan's economy is the size of one of the US's least influential states, they're the fifth most populous country in the world. They have 241 million people, showing that this nation is not economically developed. Its main exports are textiles, clothes, and materials to make clothing. Look, textile articles, articles of apparel knit or crocheted, cotton, articles of apparel knit or Pakistan is a very resource-rich nation. They're estimated to have about 9 billion barrels of oil, according to the International Energy Agency. They have over 105 trillion cubic feet of natural gas, and they are one of the largest gold and copper reserves on the planet. It doesn't matter to most of the world that Pakistan is resource rich. They are so poorly put together, and they constantly have their military stepping in to take over the government, that countries and firms in general are very hesitant to put any money into that country. There are two bodies that are willing to invest in Pakistan. One of them is the IMF, and the other is, of course, China. Pakistan imports 29% of all their materials from China. In fact, Pakistan owes China about $30 billion, while they only owe the IMF about $10 billion. And Pakistan is constantly in danger of defaulting on this debt to China, which China keeps rolling over into a new loan where they pay more money. And you may be wondering why. Why would China keep lending money to Pakistan when they are so unstable and constantly having to rewrite their loans? And the answer to that question is China's neighbor and major territorial competitor, India. As long as Pakistan is tied to China as strong as they are, then China has a major ally against India. China has a habit of building infrastructure, especially in port cities, to very poor countries. And when those poor countries can't pay back the debt, China just takes over the port like they did in Hambantota in Sri Lanka. There is already a suspicion that China is building a naval base in Pakistan's port city of Gwadar for these same reasons. And all this is doing is giving the Pakistanis less sovereignty over their own land and China much more influence and power. But there is only so much Chinese influence that can be had in Pakistan, since the US is one of Pakistan's main trading partners and military allies. The US and Pakistan have had bilateral relations for 76 years. There is a lot of influence between these two countries. And while Pakistan gave the US the cold shoulder as they kind of warmed up to China, a lot of Pakistanis are starting to regret that decision, as quoted from this article. Many Pakistanis also observe that the alliance has been exacting on their country's resources, people, and international reputation. Another quote to pay attention to is that the US or the IMF has never ever taken over someone else's territory as payment for a loan. And China is taking a big gamble in trying something like that, since Pakistan does have a great deal of terrorism, and some of it, in my opinion, is sponsored by the US. This article from the South China Morning Post says, China's Belt and Road expansion in Pakistan at risk as terrorist attacks surge. In short, Pakistan is incredibly unstable. They are in a place where they owe everybody money, especially China and the IMF. The IMF is willing to overlook a lot of things, but China is not. And China will be even deeper in the financial hole if they can't get anything back out of what they've invested in Pakistan. They can't cut Pakistan off. They can't cut too much investment, even though they are doing it now, because they need Pakistan as some kind of counter to India. China is suffering a major economic crisis right now, and I'm not sure if they can keep lending money to Pakistan or other countries at this rate. And if those loans keep slowing down, I see a more pro-Western shift in this country and a bunch of others.